Jordan and I were talking earlier, and we have some connections to how software is built, and we were talking about some platforms and things like that. So we're going to move from a totally geek-oriented conversation to a little bit businessy for now and entrepreneurial. And thanks again, Jordan, for coming to speak with us today on Business Spotlight.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here, Bill.
Thanks. So to build on our initial conversation before we started recording, I wanted to I got curious about some of the things that building this particular business with ChekRite you learned from. What would you say is your biggest learning as an entrepreneur that you got from designing this product and moving it forward?
I think it's always, with any startup, I think the lessons are pretty similar in this. It's always going to take longer and cost more. I think that's probably the biggest one, and that's not unique. That is a really common theme. It's always going to take longer to build, and it's always going to cost more than you think. And whatever runway you think you've got, it's not enough. You need. And I think different companies, and I think even in different stages of my company, sometimes it's cost twice as much as I thought, sometimes it's cost half as much as I thought,
right.
5 times, sometimes it's taken 3 times longer, sometimes it's only taken a month longer, but it's just never. And I've been in IT for 20 odd years, and you can't be getting better at it by now, but it's still I think we do get better at it, but it's just, I think startups just throw so many unknowns at you. And my career was corporate IT, and so everything was a lot slower and a lot more deliberate and a lot more planned, and so things, you could predict stuff a lot better. And then when you're thrown in the startup world, it's like, wow, like you've got all sorts of things thrown at you that you were just never predicting, and things take longer and cost more. I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned.
That is, that's excellent advice, in my opinion. I come across a lot of individuals that have a concept. They think that it's only going to take X and only this amount of time. And you're right. I think you're absolutely right. So tell us a little bit about ChekRite, if you could. Who's its main client, et cetera, and the problem they solve?
Yeah. So what ChekRite does is ChekRite, we make very easy to use checklists. We replace paper-based ones, and we turn that into structured information. I think that's so if you've ever seen someone with a clipboard and a piece of paper going around checking things, doing what we look at what we call observable information. So if they're looking at observable information, things that they look at, not sensory, not IoT, not that sort of stuff. Other people are doing that. We don't do that. We take information that's curated by human experts. These are people who are the best in their field. They might be a mechanic, or maybe it's an electrician, or maybe they're running a construction site. It doesn't matter. They're whatever they're looking at, and taking what they're seeing and turning that into structured information. So information you can actually do something with. I think we've sort of got over the, checklists have been around for a while, but a lot of people just tick and flick them. They're pretty, the checklists actually started in the 1930s in the aviation industry, because they kept having plane crashes, and planes weren't even that old, and they still kept having crashes. And when they started looking into it, they found that it's just simple human errors were happening over and over again. And so they introduced these checklists to say, okay, go through this every single time. And to this day, pilots still do that. It doesn't matter how many hundreds or thousands of hours you've been flying a plane, they still have a checklist that they go through every time, because humans are they're lazy, and we will always try to find. We will always try to find shortcuts. We always try to find shortcuts. And the checklist, and shortcuts are great in certain things, but not when it comes to safety, and not when it comes to maintenance of assets or machines or buildings or whatever. I think that's where you don't want shortcuts. I think that's when you actually want to make sure that things are being done right. So we take our product's pretty unique in the market. Because we started in the mining industry, we worked with a lot of technically very, very good people, but when it came to technology, not as familiar. And but they often found that technology was just getting in the way of them doing their job. We've just got this job to do. I've got to fill out all this paperwork, but And so often when people would put technology in front of them, it actually made things worse for them. It slowed them down even more because they weren't great typists, or they just, just things just got in the way. And so we built a platform that enables for people to build their own checklist, but it's done without any typing at all. And I think that's one of our secret sources is because we've concentrated a lot on user interfaces. Our UX designers are ex-Apple, and we concentrated so much on making sure that that we could capture all this rich information, but without any typing at all. And so we do a lot of clever tricks, and there's a different ideology, but invariably, not only are we capturing this information, we're capturing it in a structured way so that people can do things with it. I think if you imagine a library, and if you walk into a library and all the books are just scattered on the floor in a big pile, all the information's there, the data's there, but good luck finding it. Whereas if you structure the information, you're using maybe the Dewey Decimal System, and you're using shelves, and then instantly when you want to go and find something, it's very easy to find because the information is structured. You can actually find those books that you need to find. And then that's what we do. We structure information as we're capturing it. We actually trick our front end workers into becoming data entry people without them realizing that's what we're doing. We're making we're tricking them into sort of structuring this data as they're capturing it, and we don't let them type things in or just record unstructured information. We push them right back towards structured information so that we can actually do things with it. Plug it into my background's in artificial intelligence and software engineering. So one of the big things with AI is training models. Everyone's talking about you have to have good training models. You have to have good training models, and when you've got completely unstructured information, it's really hard to build those training models, and you get all sorts of inaccuracies. Whereas if you've got completely structured information, plugging that into any of these generative AI models and things like that becomes so much easier, and you get much higher quality information out the back end of it.
Yeah, I love it. So you had a background in this prior to starting. How long has ChekRite been operating doing this?
So we've been building it for about 10 years. We've really been operating for about 6. Yeah,
okay.
But it's been
6 is great in this environment. 6 is a trial by fire. That's great. Wow.
Yeah, so we started a bit, my background, I ran IT for some of the biggest insurance companies in the world. So I was chief information officer for Zurich Insurance. I ran IT for AXA, for Japan, the UK, Asia Pacific, and then ran innovation for the AXA group globally. That was my last corporate role. Then I retired from corporate life, traveled around the world for a few years, spent 5 months driving around the States, 6 months in Africa, just checking stuff out, and then finally got back to Australia and sort of thought, well,
what's next?
What's next? Well, I was talking to I grew up in Papua New Guinea in Indonesia, so I grew up in mining towns, and I used to hear all these stories of all these war stories and near misses of trucks catching fire and things like that, and running over each other, and 20 years later, I've come out of an insurance background, and I'm talking to these same old guys now, and it's the same stories. They're still seeing this. It's got better, but they're still happening a lot, and so I sort of thought, well, what can I do to apply what I've learned about risk and compliance over 20 years of insurance IT work, and apply that into these other industries. So we went straight into mining, then we went into construction, food production, transport, aerospace, manufacturing. So the principles apply across multiple industries.
That's great. Yeah, I love it. So food production, give me an example of that. Just making sure the handling procedures are operating well, and supply chain is.
And it's hygiene. You've got to do walk around and visual inspections of the areas every day. They've got machines. One of our customers has a machine that makes 1 ton of chicken nuggets an hour. So those things are moving fast. They've got a lot of parts, and so you've got to actually there's a lot of maintenance and checking on those things just to make sure they're safe, and make sure that particularly in food production, make sure they're clean as well. So
and have proper records for all of it.
In
case you need to research something. Okay. So if you're thinking about your role in ChekRite, what do you see as your most challenging part of your role here, when positioning it, or what?
No, I think so I've sort of got a technical role then, obviously also the managerial role then, but I think
Hmm.
probably my biggest challenging thing I spend a lot of time talking to investors. We've taken ChekRite to an amazing place. The product is really, really good. We're now starting to grow. We're probably putting on about 60 new companies a month onto the platform, so it is growing. But it's one of those things where you've got to it's a different, it's not a, because it's a B2B product and it's not really a B2C, so it's not and every business is a little bit different. The
Hmm.
product needs to be sort of tailored to that business.
Hmm.
Because everyone says, well, I'm an individual, and everyone says that, and our business is different, and so our product needs to be tailored a little bit, and just while we're getting through that scaling up things of helping people to we teach them how to use it. It's sort of like we've invented Excel in a world where spreadsheets didn't exist. And
Yeah.
in the beginning, like no one knew what to do. And,
Right.
and, and we've
Right.
got to we've got to educate the market. But once you show someone how to use a spreadsheet, they're good to go off and build all their own spreadsheets. They don't go back to Microsoft every time and say, hey, I need to now make a profit and loss statement. Help
Yeah.
me. They
They
don't need
imagine
that.
what they want the data to do and the intelligence from it, and then boom, they just start
Yes, and
creating
they
it.
and they
Yeah.
now know how to use that tool.
Yeah.
But when you've never seen that tool, if you've never seen a spreadsheet before in your life, it could be a bit confusing. You wouldn't know, well, how do I do this? How do I use formulas or whatever? I guess we've got that same sort of methodology happening with our product this is like a new tool for companies, for businesses to work with, to get structure in their processes and to make sure the same thing's being done the same way every single time. And
Yeah.
so
Cool.
it does take a little bit to educate people. But once they learn how to use the system, then that's it. They're off and running. And so I think what we're been looking, where my big challenge is at the moment is finding the investment that we need to bring on the staff on our side to help through that implementation and get people up and running.
Right.
Because once they're up and running, we hardly ever hear from them. They just go and use the product.
Yeah. In a way, it's almost as if your product could help with coming up with a better implementation program in the first place for any newbies. If you automate the automation setup, then
Yeah.
you're really good to go. So,
and,
huh.
and that and obviously that comes with practice, right? The more you do, the better you get at doing these sort of things. And I think that's because it's like I think go back to that Excel analogy. I think when the very first spreadsheet was created, it was probably done in a financial basis, and
Hmm.
someone said, "Oh, look, I
Oh,
can do
clearly.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can use this for the." And then someone said, "Hang on, I could use this to organize my kids' bake sale on the weekend." Like, yeah,
Sure.
oh shit, really? You can do that? Yeah. So yeah, and I think we suffered a little bit from that because we built this product initially to sort of solve some issues in the mining industry, and then all these different companies came at us and said, "Oh my God, you can use it for this, you can use it for this, you can use it for this," and we've sort of been a little bit of a victim of our own success, and we've spread ourselves
So the
very
expectation
thin.
is to have you let them use it for this new quirky method, and then it needs an implementation pathway for that, and it adds cost to
Yeah,
you, etc.
yeah.
Yeah.
But once we like someone comes along to us and says, "Hey, I've got a forklift hire company." Once we actually get that up and running, if someone else comes and says, "I've got a forklift hire company," well, a lot of those processes are very similar. And then when a third person comes and says, "Hey, I've got a forklift company," and
Yeah.
I think when you do that, then they're not learning from scratch for the first time. It's actually a lot of that stuff is transferable, and
Yeah.
we've said, well, actually, here, this will help you out. This will get
Right.
you up and running, and eventually it does become almost a double click and run. But
Right.
I think in the beginning it doesn't. I think it's in the beginning
So
we've
you,
got to.
so you're templatizing quite a few business styles and business
Yeah.
industries and the need sets. That's good. I think
But doing it in a way of quality, not just, I think when you looked at, if you looked at the app stores when they first came out,
oh
the
boy.
the
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of there was a lot of crap in there.
Mm.
And they were just letting anyone. I think Android was guilty of this in the beginning. They just let anyone put anything up, and you had 10,000 torch apps. Like how many apps do you need to turn on the torch on your phone, right? It's
At least 2,000.
or
I need at
30,000.
least
Yeah.
2,000 torch apps.
Well, and there are about 30,000 fart apps as well, right?
Yeah.
How many times do you need to create the same app? And so we've been sort of taking that a similar approach in that we want to actually have sort of a curated stuff. We only want quality in there, and I don't want to be able to go out and say, hey, I've got 20 million templates already built. That's bullshit, because how would you find the right ones? How do you know they're all good quality? I'd rather have a smaller number, but they've been curated and say, actually, this has been validated by people who work in your industry, and therefore this is get a bit of trust around it.
And they can get it back to doing the reason why they engaged with you in the first place, is to do their job and have all that processed correctly. Love it. So thinking about your role as GM, etc., are there quotes or sayings that you use with the team, or even sayings that you use with yourself to kind of reset your mind and keep you focused?
I think the one of the big ones, which I say a lot, and I'm trying to get more of my people to say that, it is just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think when you're an engineering focused company, or an engineering based company, it is very, very easy to, we could do this, we could do that, and it's we always trying to rein ourselves back to say, well, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And the other one is, I think the other one I use a bit too is, it's by an American inventor called Charles Kettering, and he basically said, the quote I got from him, it was actually given to me on my first day when I started as CIO for Zurich Insurance up in Japan. The CEO had one of those little desk calendars with a quote a day sort of thing on it. And he tore this one off and he gave it to me and said, this is for you. This is the one I want you to work with. And that was like 20 odd years ago. And it said, if you've always done it that way, it's probably wrong.
Oh, wow. So, hey, but yeah, for that, interesting.
Yeah, and it was such a great quote. And and so I've used that one a lot as well.
That is a huge one, because of the type of industries that your product services probably has a lot of that old school. This is how we've always done it, man. They're just saying that.
Yeah, but why?
Stomping the foot on the ground, as they say. Yeah. Oh, I like it. That's a really good one. And to back up to your previous one, fantastic source for learning business at the smaller level. I guess it's kind of a popular business book, was Business Speak, and they use the phrase called "coulds kill companies."
Yes.
You spread yourself too thin on all the coulds, you're not doing the things that you must, right? Or doing it well enough, right? So yeah, interesting. So with regards to your journey to get to where you are, have you ever had, I mean, evidently you did. There's one guy who pulled that quote back and handed to you. Anything more formal though? Has there been a coach or a mentor in your career or two that pop out?
Yeah, I've had, certainly in my previous career, I've had several mentors. I think in my current career, as a CEO of a startup, I've had scaling up coaches, which have been really helpful, really helpful.
Yep.
I tend to do a lot of reading and I think because of my background of having worked all over the world in so many different cultures and so many different types of organizations, a lot of the stuff that I just pull all different bits from different areas, and some of the things that we do is quite unique, and like it's one of those things where you look at it and people go, wow, yeah, that's obvious, but we'd never thought of that before. And so I think the way that we operate our business is very much like that. It's a lot of those sort of things when you first look at it, you think, well, that's counterintuitive, but then when you actually when you dig in, you go, actually, yeah, there's been a lot of thought happening behind that. And I think we've we're very much engineers at heart at ChekRite, and so we do sort of plan. We're always thinking 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead in terms of a product, where the product is. So I think the other thing I really like to try and do is surprise and delight, particularly when it comes to the customers. We do like to, we don't necessarily publish big roadmaps. we often will surprise and delight, whether it be on service, whether it be delivering things earlier, whether it be delivering features in the product. We don't necessarily. Sometimes we have to, give advance warning, but a lot of the times we don't, and it's it's sort of launched with a surprise. And say,
yeah,
by the way,
gamify it, if you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the that feature. That was one of my questions that I had in my head. It was, what do you include in your communications in a newsletter or whatever? What would you include? And it sounds as if the fun stuff, you don't show all the fun stuff. You show it in the experience to the actual users.
And we've sort of moved away from, we did newsletters and customer news. We moved away from that because, to be honest, most people don't read them. And even though I think newsletters are often very internally focused. Oh my God, we've just spent 6 months building this. I need to tell someone about this. And the customer doesn't care, right? So we've moved away from that sort of thing to more just-in-time type of stuff. We use a great product called User Pilot. And so User Pilot, we don't always use it the way they intended to be used, but it's an overlay that you can sit on, on top of your website and things like that. And then, because particularly for us, people who use our product are registered users, so we know all about them anyway, and so we know what role they have in the company, or what role they have in our, what user role and what they have in our system. And so we're not going to show features to people who are not administrators. No, exactly. Why am I going to tell them about this new administration function we've got? Why am I going to show all my users that when they can't use it? And so because we know when they log in, we know who they are, we know what role they've got, we know how many times they've logged in and things like that. We use that information to present just in time and say, oh, by the way, you're in this section. And you're at this level. We now can show you how to do this. You can now do this. Here's a new feature we brought in to make this little part of your job a bit easier. And so we don't broadcast out to our tens of thousands of users and have 99% of them ignore it. We actually we build it in so that they discover it, because they may not log into our platform every day. They may not come in for another 2 or 3 weeks. And so they log in 3 weeks later and then, okay, now's a good time to tell them about this new feature that's made their life a little bit easier. So that's that's in keeping with our surprise and delight sort of thing that we try to.
I think that's awesome. It's contextual communication to delight, to have them go a little wow factor, or that'll make it easier. Oh, that'll make it easier. And if they're constantly hearing that from you, they're liking the platform. Yeah, I like it. So as we wrap up the chat, I wanted to know, and I asked this of many people in Business Spotlight, if you were to look back in time or go back in time and chat with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give, the 18-year-old Jordan?
Well, I spent 20 years in working for big multinational companies, and that was probably, I think I got a lot of great experience out of that, but it was probably maybe about 5 or 10 years too much. I think I was always going to create my own startup. That was always going to happen. I think I should have probably got out about 10 years earlier than I did, because I think but there's been some important lessons learned along the way. I think I speak to a lot of other people who say, I've got this great idea. And one of the things that people don't understand with a startup is the idea is worth maximum 5% of your success. Maximum. No matter how good that idea is, it's the maximum it will be worth is 5%. Most of them are around 1%. And so then your ability to execute on that idea is still only worth another 20 to 30%. And then after that, it's sales and marketing. Right? It's your ability to sell and proliferate that idea.
That's good.
So one is your ability to actually do the thing, and so a lot of people will have an idea, but they have no idea how to sell, how to build it. Other people have an idea and know how to build it, but then they have no idea how to actually proliferate it,
position it, right?
And it's those. I think that's why you see often with the most successful companies, myself excluded, because we only have a single founder, but the most successful companies have 2 or 3 people in them because of that. They have someone who had the idea, they had someone who knows how to build it, and they knew someone who knows how to sell it or market it. those three different skills, are often required to make a startup successful.
Yeah, I agree. I often use that when I'm in a chat about that. It actually is a smart move for someone who has the idea, but not necessarily the ops, or manufacturing development chops to get those individuals in. You might end up getting 30% of your baby, but that 30% is 1000% bigger than it ever would have been if you tried to do it yourself. So it's like
Yeah,
bring in the brains, bring in the
yeah,
experience. Yeah, I love it. That's a
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, I like that a lot. You're right. You're right. A lot of startups that I interface with, they just sort of keep it all on their own shoulders, and they don't get that collaborative. You know, you were saying take the leap. You should have leaped out 5 years earlier.
Yeah,
Maybe some entrepreneurs need to leap into very carefully laid relationships and partnerships with the people who know their stuff faster. We'd
yeah.
probably see. Yeah,
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 and I think unlike I'm older than most startups in terms of when I started, but I think the having that big corporate background, we put in place right from the very beginning, even when there was only one other employee, we had a lot of that big corporate stuff in place. We had HR policies, we things that you wouldn't expect and it's been
yeah.
it's been very beneficial having
Watching
that
the
sort of
cash
stuff.
flow like a hawk, being disciplined
Yeah,
with your finances, disciplined with your time, disciplined with your messaging. I liked it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so if you are just starting out, I think there are I don't think you can always look at those big businesses and say they're dinosaurs and they're going to go extinct. I think they're still around for a reason. But I think that you can certainly learn just as they can learn from a small startup. You can learn from big companies too, and not necessarily not always learning good things. You can actually learn what not to do as well. So,
Yeah, you're right. You're not just because it's big doesn't mean it's perfect, right? That's true.
no,
Absolutely. So wow, that is a very good note to wrap up on. And thanks, Jordan, for your time. This was jam-packed with a lot of good wisdom, so I appreciate you
yeah,
sharing.
so,
And where do we send people to, other than the obvious place like ChekRite?
yeah. ChekRite.com, is probably where people that's where you hear our story. That's where we're about to launch a new website. I think it's one of the, we don't do a lot of sales and marketing ourselves at the moment, but because we're so busy. But
Mm,
but yeah, we're hoping to we're launching a new website shortly. But ChekRite.com is still there, still works. You can contact us through that.
great. So let's be on the lookout not only for the way it looks now, but the way it will look. So I
Yeah,
hope a lot of people hop onto it and check out the offering. So thanks again, Jordan, for your time. And once again, we were talking with Jordan Miller from ChekRite. And have a great day there, Jordan. Thanks again.
you too, Bill. Cheers, thanks.